just for the people that I don't recognize, I'm Kat McKinnon.
And I'm Brianna Wiles. Hello.
And welcome. If this is your first live, to your first live. If this is not your first live, welcome back. And we wanted to start off with just having everybody say their name and just where they're sitting tonight. And then we'll kind of get into just seeing how you all are doing with the course. So let's see, anybody excited about sharing information about themselves? Anybody want to go first?
Paula.
Oh, wait, just make sure to unmute yourselves. You should be able to.
Our volume's down.
Oh, here, let's see. No, my volume's up. Oh, that's interesting.
I wonder if it's because. No, it's not.
Taylor, would you mind just trying to say something?
Unmute for a second.
Hello.
Oh yeah, you can work. So
okay, Paula, something's going on where we can't hear you.
Maybe try
I
to.
see two Paulas on my screen.
So Paula, maybe try from your phone. I have to do that with my computer all the time. But okay, Paula, while you're sorting that, Taylor, would you mind introducing yourself?
Paula, if you
first?
unmute on your phone, I think is what you could try.
Oh, there she is. She's on.
Yeah, she
Okay.
All right, Taylor, go for it.
Well, I will go. My name's Taylor. I'm from Colorado Springs, and I'm here because I got my plant camp from home, I guess, last semester or whatever, but I wasn't able to really follow along because I do urban farming and I was knee deep in the season. So I'm really happy to get back into my witchy self as the season slows down, and I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, nice, Taylor. Oh, so glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right. Paula, if you worked out the sound on your phone, we can try. Oh yeah, we can ask her to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Yay! I'm Paula from Madison, Wisconsin. Met them this summer at the Harvest Fest and liked what I saw. So, of course, I'm on the phone. My dog starts whining. So I've been enjoying the studying, getting stuff done, making little tinctures and not what. So, yeah. That's about it. They know me as the bitter whore because I like bitters and I can't wait to make bitters. So there you have it.
Thank you for that, Paula.
Welcome anytime. You want to see my bitters collection?
Yes.
No, I just have a few little bitters. I got good bitters. I got cans of bitters. I have ancient bitters from Germany somewhere. I don't know. They're in a box. Oh, here they are. Underburgen or something like that.
Oh, the Germans, Italians, Spanish are very good at bitters. They remember to do it right.
So I'm waiting for that chapter.
Oh, it's coming. I think it's coming up in 8 or something.
I think, yeah.
Cocktails. Awesome. Thanks, Paula. Anyone else want to introduce themselves? If you're coming in just now, we were just introducing ourselves and telling everybody where we're coming from tonight before we get started.
I can go.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carolina, and I am right now in Snowmass Village. I've gotten here just as the pandemic started, and I kind of got stuck here, which was just absolutely amazing. I'm not complaining. So I started going around, the mountains, and I just found this book and it became my Bible. So here I am. I'm kind of a newbie. I'm actually still a little bit behind. I started last week, so
that's fine.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Welcome.
And 2 Sarahs.
Yeah, my name is Sarah Camp. Sorry I missed most introductions. I was having Bluetooth problems, I think. But I am in Grafton, Wisconsin, which is north of Milwaukee. And I have been into native plantings and have been unlawning our lawn, and then moved to edible landscaping a little bit. And then more recently have started like my own apothecary garden. So this year I'm growing calendula, lemon balm, catnip, rosemary, oregano. There's a bunch of other stuff in there, but so I've worked on harvesting that, and I am a pharmacist by trade, so naturally interested in this.
Oh, that's awesome. We just had a pharmacist go through our clinical program for the school that I work for, and it's such a good melding of like, scientific East with more like intuitive West as far as herbal medicine. So I'm like, oh, the more pharmacists and MDs and nurses we can have into this, the better. So glad you're here. All right, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself? You were the last one.
Sure. Hello. I joined a couple of minutes late. I'm Sarah. I live in, sorry about that light, Nashville, Tennessee, and I was actually visiting Crested Butte. I've been there many times and stumbled upon Rooted Apothecary and came in, and I think I've met both of y'all. Went to the store several times, and then I played Plinko Friday night.
Woo woo!
And so I ordered my herbs a little late. I had my
That's
list
okay.
going, and I was like, I need to buy from Rose Mountain. I need to buy something. So, and I've already, I've got a few that I had already sort of had in my pantry. I've been kind of experimenting with growing my own herbal garden. We have lots of woods behind us. I'm lucky my husband was an agriculture major, which he is not. He's currently not practicing, but he and I both enjoy going in our backyard and kind of looking for things to forage. But I've always wanted to take an herbalism class. And so I stumbled upon Rooted Apothecary and just loved it, and brought home several things with me. And, I would love, I guess the dream and why I'm taking this is to start my own business of some sorts. I guess, but my first and foremost love is tea. So that's what I'm very excited to learn about, learning how to blend and combine different herbs. I would love some advice on how to grow them more effectively. We live in a lot of shade because of the trees. So I guess right now I'm growing a lot of mint, a lot of different mint varieties, a lot of lemon balm. I mainly have herbs in my garden, and the person who lived in our house before us was a master gardener. So she's got a lot of native things that were strategically planted. So
Nice.
yes. Nice
Well,
to see everybody.
What's that?
Nice to see everybody. I've been looking forward to this group Zoom and seeing everybody.
Yeah. Well, we have one more person to introduce in the background.
Oh, the two are back here.
There's a tiny little
Someone's joined
participant
right here.
Oh,
This is little Acorn. You might hear some chewing going on behind us, so he's trying to stay occupied so he stays out of trouble right now. He's from Leadville, Colorado.
Currently living in Gunnison.
Currently living in Gunnison,
Visiting.
Colorado.
So now that we've got everybody introduced, we wanted to just see where you all were at. Has everybody been able to kind of at least skim through the first week of class and the books? I know it's a lot, so it's fine if you haven't gotten, even past the first week. It's very much take it at your own pace, but
There's
just
a lot of reading there in the first few weeks. It gets a little dense, but like you got to kind of truck through, and then you get to all the fun parts.
I think the first part's fun.
I mean, it's fun. Like some people are like, I just want to make medicine and blend teas and drink tea, and I just want to get there. But the first part's kind of tell you how to be able to understand people and herbs and how not to kill yourself and how to properly identify plants. You know, some essentials.
So who's at least gone through bits of the first week? A show of hands. Almost done with week 3. So Sarah, ooh, how many people are into week 2? I want to, a few folks. How many people? And then we've got at least one who's in week 3. Anybody else to week 3?
Good work.
Wow, yeah, I know, this is very impressive. Let's just start out with week 1 then. Week 1 is all about what's 3 main basic principles that are really important that you get before you move on with the rest of the course. Thing 1 is Materia Medica, of course. We're going to talk about some of our Materia Medica tonight and do a little organoleptics and some botanizing. So that's thing 1. There's going to be a lot of Materia Medica that come up throughout the entire rest of the course. And that's kind of the specific herbalism term for when we say Materia Medica, we mean all the info about the plant. So like where it grows, how to grow it, its range, cautions and contraindications. So like, don't take this herb with this medication in this way, as well as indications. So like absolutely use that meant for belly aches, use it for sore muscles, etc. So that's the first main principle. The second is, has everybody been able to look through at least one Materia Medica? And kind of just be like, yeah, okay, I got this. This is pretty straightforward. And kind of how to use it a little bit. There's probably some bits that aren't super exact yet because we haven't had some of the medicine making parts of things, right? The preparation section is kind of what we build on as we go out through the course, like how to make a tincture, and how to make a decoction, how to make an infusion, how to make a salve. So we go through every preparation that we have inside of those Materia Medica, you'll learn how to make. So just know that even though we don't have exactly how to make everything inside of those Materia Medica, the methods are all going to be sprinkled throughout the rest of the course. Anybody questions about, or you want to add anything about Materia Medica as far as pieces to know? Or if you got questions?
They can be, you can do what you want with them. Like if it's like you're looking for the plant and you're trying to help yourself identify or get familiar with it, that fits in there. But then you can also kind of skip through if it's like you're not having to identify the plant, but you already have the herb on hand. You can look at the medicinal components or the different ways that we use ratios or the different herbal medicines we use, like what would that be? Like the remedies that we use it in, like whether it's for tinctures or teas or how we usually prepare it for medicine. So, did we get a new joiner?
Yeah. Oh, Kristen. Yeah. Sarah, go ahead.
It's Kristen. I just wanted to ask the first part about learning the Latin and the family names and all that. Like, are you guys using that as herbalists? Like, every day, like I was trying to make flashcards. I am not the best at memorizing. And so, it, like it just pops in your head because you guys have studied it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and
it's good. It's like when you're learning the best way that I've driven it into my head was like actually going into the field and learning the plants. And so I would take books with me and have like a compilation almost of like a really good flower book that had really good pictures in it. And, and then a botanical key that maybe didn't have the best pictures, but it had really good ways to ID the plant. And then I'd like to have like an herbal medicine book of some sort with me or a foraging book or something where I could then verify that plant that I was looking at kind of was what it was, or that I could get there. And so I always like to have like a lot of different books, but the point being is all those books are going to have your common name in your Latin. And a lot of those books between those 3 could have different common names than what the Latin name has. So a lot of times you're going to like the index and you're looking at the Latin name. You're not looking at the common name because sometimes you'll miss the fact that like that could have been in that book if you were just looking at something like a common name. Does that make sense? So it's like, it's really important, even just as like a layman's foundation, when you're looking through guidebooks or picture books or medicinal books, I think it's really important to like read the name of the plant and then read the Latin along with it so that your brain constantly is seeing that connection to it. And then just butcher your Latin until you hear somebody else say it. And then you're like, that's how you say that?
Yeah. Well, the important thing to remember too is like, you know, the word Tyrannosaurus Rex. Everybody knows Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yeah. How about like Velociraptor, maybe, or like a pterodactyl, or like a tricer. Those are all Latin names. So it's more just like I think that there's a lot of like, oh no, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but it's a totally dead language that was completely made up. It was never actually spoken. So all you got to do, I had a teacher who said this great set of terms, like just pronounce all the letters and say it like you mean it. Be like, you can say whatever, say it however you want. You know, it can be Nepeta or Nepeta or Achillea or Attila, like doesn't matter. You just say it and everybody's gonna know what you mean. And also this just happened actually last week. So I had I get my favorite game is like, what is this? And I just put this in the chat, yucca and yucca. Everybody know those two things. There's like yucca, which is the like really spiny bayonet plant. Sarah, if you're in Tennessee, you might not know it as much. And Paula, maybe Wisconsin, you might not have seen it, but it's like a really spiny, deserty plant. And I know it through a number of indigenous folks teaching me like, oh yeah, we use the root to wash our hair because the root is so soapy and so fibrous. It's like a stick of soapy fiber. You would not want to eat it. But then there's this stuff called yucca that you can get in the store. It's kind of like this soft, like water chestnut consistency sort of root vegetable. And they're both roots and they're both called yucca. And sometimes even they're both spelled exactly the same. And I had a student who was like, I can eat this, right? Because it's yucca. And they were like, I tried it. And I tried boiling it. I tried putting it into salad. And I think it's just kind of old. And they basically just made soap soup. And it was just this, oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the base. So anyway, that's common names. That's like, or like sage. So like you got sagebrush that we have here that's like bitter and so intense and you would not stuff your turkey with it. And then there's like sage, like the kind you can get in the grocery store, but they're totally different. And if if you're ordering herbs or if you're trying to grow them, it's really important to have that all separated out, right? And that's how Latin names can be supportive for us. That's the other piece. And I totally agree with your get into the field and get the book,
it's like the sight to brain. It's like when you can see the picture and find the plant and read the common name and read the Latin name, it really does something for your brain. Or even if you're just on a Google search and you're using your Latin name to start finding pictures of leaves and flowers and different things like that, if that's the closest you're going to get to it for a while, that's a good way to get familiarized, is like do it through the Google jungle. But yeah, I think there's something with like that memorization and training your brain to become an encyclopedia of Latin and plants.
That's a great question though. Anybody else questions about Materia Medica? Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, sure. Carolina.
Yeah, hi. I don't know. I don't think it's about Materia Medica, but just in general, I have a couple questions. Okay. The first one is, I was just wondering, I'm hoping I'll still be around next summer in Colorado, that is. But is there like a way to maybe like go out with you guys, like, maybe not for like a few weeks, but like I don't know if I'm making sense, but go out and ID the plants with you, like follow you for a little bit.
That's how we started this whole program, was because we do take groups out in the field. And so that's how Plant Camp started in general, was the fact that we do between like 3 days to 2 week courses. Mm-hmm. Taylor's actually been to 2, 3, 2, 1, twice.
Yeah.
And it's in Colorado usually. And like, we'd love to try to branch out other places as well, but we haven't set the dates for this year yet. But what we're thinking is that there will be like a spring, a summer, maybe a late summer or something like that, that'll go on. And then we're also even thinking for like the next opening of these plant camps that we want to have like a medicine making weekend where it's just like people can come out, or if they're in the state of Colorado, get together so that we can do more of like the hands-on components of this course so that it gets even more comfortable that way. So that'll be something that we're plotting for spring, and it'll be in Denver. So somewhere that's easy access for people.
So the way to do it would be basically register again for the plant camp, or how?
We send it out in an email usually. So we get together, we get all of our dates and see kind of what works between both of us.
But
and
it is,
usually
it's
schedule it.
another weekend course kind of thing. That's in like an extra bit.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question was just from the first week, you say, choose an herb and stay with it for a week. Like, talk with it. I forgot exactly how you say it. It's very nice. I love it. I have a little bit of a hard time communicating with the plants and also sticking to like one plant for a week. Is it really important? What am I doing wrong that I'm not like, I don't know. I just want to like try several of them or something like that.
It's hard. It's a hard practice for sure. Like it's not easy. So, but it's more like giving the intention to try that. Like you can have a bunch of other herbs throughout the week, but it's more giving that one plant the attention of like being able to feel it or have like a sit with it and have a cup of tea with it. And maybe try to do that a few times a week to see if you've noticed a shift in some part of your body from intentionally incorporating it more. Like a lot of us use thyme or oregano or pepper or different things like that daily, like spices are herbs. But when you set that intention to like one herb is kind of more what we mean. It doesn't mean you have to be like really strict about it and make sure you consume like 5 ounces a day. It's more like make a cup of tea a few times a week, but like think of that herb for a week and how it's made you feel while you're using it. Is that what you were kind of?
Yeah. And I think like the more it's not like, okay, you have to be monogamous with one herb for each week. I think that's exactly true. This came out of I used to do this all the time. And yeah, you can think of, if you've ever heard of dietas, where people like just tune in with just one substance for a while. There's a value to really feeling the effect of one herb inside your body. It's kind of like, you go to a party and you talk to 20 different people and you're like, wow, all those people were so interesting. And like, this one was spicy and this one was a little bitter. And it's kind of like that with herbs. If you just go to the party and you just talk with 5 minutes with each person, it's like, wow, this one is bitter more. Yeah, totally. You got like a little bit of a surface knowledge of all those people. When you take one herb, you take like, we'll talk about this. This is that marshmallow. And this is one of my faves for especially people in Colorado to try, because you can really notice a difference and feel energetics with our more moistening herbs. But you take a quart of an herb, for 3 or 4 days in a week, you really get to feel how it's affecting your body. Compared to, you go to a party and you're like, wow, I had a great time, but you were not exactly sure maybe why. Or like, maybe you go to a party and you don't have such a good time. You're like, I don't know why, I just feel like sticky and crummy and ugh. Whereas if you actually spent time with a person, you went on a hike or, you went to dinner or something like that and spent some real time with them, you'd be like, oh, okay, I know a little bit more about this person compared to that little conversation at a party. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. And what do you try to pay attention to? I feel like I'm not feeling anything.
Oh, okay. Well, so you might be a mega doser like me, but yeah. What have you been trying?
I actually started with marshmallow leaf.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, there's a few different pieces to it. Some medicines are more gentle, just like some people are more gentle, and you need like a little more time with them to really get to know their nature. If it's the leaf, you can try a couple of different things. You can make a really strong, long overnight infusion if you've only been making a really short infusion. And actually, we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do now, but we'll go over infusions just a little bit, since that's week 4, which is basically kind of the beginning of our medicine making sections. Mm-hmm. You can take more of it. I usually go, when I'm really trying to get to know an herb, I go for a quart. Mm-hmm. I try to get at least a quart and, take it every day to get different times of the day. Tuning into your body as far as your senses is a really useful way to kind of tap in, like everything from like, how does my tongue feel, to am I peeing more or am I peeing less? How's, checking in on your nervous system, mm-hmm. and really checking in with how you feel before you taste the herb, and then how you taste after, or not how you taste, and how you feel afterwards. I don't know, do you have any other additions to that as far as listening to yourself? And listening to your body and your tastes and your sensations, but
yeah. And then even like she was saying, what comes out of you. Like some people with marshmallow will be like I remember having one guy, I think I made him a cup of like some sort of blend of like a marshmallowy tea. And he came back after not even that long, maybe a half an hour. Like I gave him a free cup to walk out of the store with, maybe an hour later. Anyway, he was so excited that he had such a good urine stream. And like he was so embarrassed to share it, but felt like he really needed to share it because like it was a problem he'd been having that he hadn't been sharing with a lot of people. And like I think he talked about it with doctors and they were kind of like, drink more water. And so he'd drink more water, but then he still wouldn't get that satisfaction. And it was because his ureters and his bladder were probably really just aggravated with dryness. And so he would drink water, and a lot of us do drink water, but we actually don't absorb the water. And so, and you notice that a lot in Colorado. And so you'll see people that see these shifts that they weren't expecting. And so that could be like firmer poops or better urine streams or looser poops, or like it could be, or like you're pooping easier. Like you used to be constipated and now you started to drink marshmallow tea. And now like, I don't remember the last time I was constipated now that I started drinking marshmallow tea. And it's almost like sometimes these things happen so subtly, but so profoundly that you forgot the ailment that you had almost because it takes time. So it might've happened over 2 weeks that all of a sudden you're pooping every day. And now you can't remember like when it was 2 to 3 days between poops, you know, and, or things like that. And so, yeah, there's different sensitivities that people have, but then it's also just like keying into your body a little bit more, you know, of like, actually there is some different things going on that weren't happening. That's kind of subtly shifted in the last couple of weeks. So a week can be enough. 2 weeks can be better, you know, of like kind of adding stuff in. Sometimes even a day, if you're used to what herbs can do for you, you can see those exchanges and those having the satisfaction of the herbs work within hours. Once you keen into their energetics that way.
Thank you. Sorry.
The balloon.
I'm really glad you asked that question because that's really this is meant to be a relatively informal Q&A so that you can all just ask what you want, but that's such a basic core piece that's going to serve all of you so well throughout the entire, never mind, just for the rest of your life, it's going to serve you well. Like, how do you tune in and listen? Yeah.
It's like the fine tuning. It's like Latin. It's the same thing. It's like your Latin comes along with the fine tuning of how to understand energetics of herbs. Like energetics of herbs confused me a lot for the first couple of years.
Yeah. She's got to go get her tiny dog.
Thank you.
I do, Sarah, to your question, we are going to talk about infusing kind of towards the end here. So we'll absolutely also talk about, sorry, this is just from the folks, the chat folks that, just a question on how long to leave infusions, but I promise we'll come to that not too long from now. Yeah, Taylor, go for it.
I have a quick question. It's not really related to the course, but I'm moving to New Orleans in April.
Oh.
And sad to leave the mountains, but there's definitely lots of beautiful medicines down there to learn about. And I was wondering if you had any like foraging recommendations for the South. I'm only seeing like Southeast, and I don't know if that's going to be relevant. It's okay if you don't. I was just like, maybe they would know.
Maybe just send us, put it in a comment section or something, Taylor, or just send me an email to my email. I know you got it.
Okay.
And I'll just have a think about it. I don't think of can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm like, Bria and
I definitely saw goldenrod when I was down there, so I'm happy about
there's
that.
There's a lot of overlap. I will say that. So it's more just some of the newer plants like the jasmines and the passion flowers and things like that. I mean, some actually of the plants that are down there are actually here in the course. But you mean like a guidebook for plant ID for that reason? Yeah, let me think about it. I know a number of herbalists down there. I just don't know.
Oh, great.
The guidebook. Yeah, shoot me an email. I'll happy to send you some resources.
Okay, thank you.
And Kristen, welcome. Sorry, we missed you out for introductions, but welcome. And we're kind of just free-forming a little bit here. If anybody has any other questions about Materia Medica or anything else throughout the course, that you've been able to see so far? Yeah, Paula.
We have cottonwood, so I collected a bunch of the buds and I put it in alcohol. And
Mhm.
even there's this white like stuff in it.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
yeah.
or is that like gone bad?
Well, what percentage alcohol did you use?
Everclear.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it. Let's see if I can make you big.
White.
No, that's just resin. No, that's good. If it smells weird, because I can't see it super well, but knowing what I know about that medicine, it's probably just resin that's precipitated to the bottom. And if you open it up, and smell it, and it doesn't, as long as it doesn't smell like not cottonwood bud resin, you know, it doesn't, if it smells like bacteria, if it smells like stanky, swampy, rotten, then it's bad. But I doubt with 95% alcohol that cottonwood buds are going to go bad ever. So yeah, it's just resin. If you shake it, does it move? Yeah, it's resins.
Did you add a little bit of water to it?
Should I?
No, did you when you did it?
I don't think so.
Because sometimes I'll notice with cottonwood that it'll get milky like that when you use Everclear with it. When you add a little water to the Everclear, it's just like the resin starting to kind of like firm up in the water.
Maybe I did, because then I think you guys said to add a certain percentage of water.
I think you added water, and that's why it got milkier, which is fine.
It's still okay. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Precipitation. All right. Well, we can talk about tea, but anybody else, Materia Medica, like kind of how to use the Materia Medica sections, or does everybody feel pretty good about that? Should I answer those questions in the chat? Oh, Taylor, would you put that in the email to me? Because the chat, I probably won't look in the chat again. But I'll remember if you email me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
For Southeast, is that what you mean?
She's going to New Orleans. It's an ID book specific to there.
There's one in the Timber Press series. It's like Southeast by someone. I haven't heard the greatest like review for it.
Okay, I did see that one. I just didn't know how relevant it would be because, I mean, it's the deep south, you know. So
Yeah, Corey Pines is good for medicinal. Corey Pine Shane. And then he just came out with a medicinal one for the South like a year ago. But the other dude is a little.
Can you type his name in the chat box?
You just did.
Oh, thank you.
Corey Shane.
So we've got your Materia Medica. Let's just move this train along. So as far as the first week, there's your Materia Medica. There's herbal actions, which is also really important for understanding Materia Medica. I'm just curious, if I say, does anyone have a favorite herbal action that you've read about that you're like, oh yes, that's the one for me? I'm mooning right now, so my favorite is Amenagog. I'm like, yes, all of them.
Antispasmodic.
Help me, yeah, antispasmodics too. Has everybody gotten to those sections and kind of just taken a look at like what an herbal action might be?
For me, it's like anything that will bring moisture. I realize like my constitution is definitely dry. Everywhere, internally, externally. So sanguine or phlegmatic, either of those, I just need the moisture.
Well, so yeah, we'll get into constitution too, but oh my goodness, sorry. Brianna's being very distracting and showing me her cute little puppy's tiny little teeth. So for you then, I would think of the actions demulcent. Demulcent.
Oh, I got mixed up in the sections.
No, but I mean, it's kind of perfect, but because it's great. This is a perfect time to differentiate too between constitution and then actions and then even energetics of herbs. But actions of herbs, that's things like demulcents or emollients, like the Colorado. Sarah, you're a lucky woman. Paula, you're a lucky woman to live in Wisconsin and Tennessee for the moisture. Makes you look 5 years younger. All that moisture, where we don't get that here in the high desert. So we love our demulcents both internally, so like our marshmallow, Like marshmallow root, like what you've been taking, Carolina, is super moistening. And another word for that when it's kind of gooey like that is demulcent. And that's usually internally moistening. And then if we put it on our skin, so like if you did, you know, a marshmallow wash or something like that on your face, that would be what we call emollient. You don't have to remember those terms for right now. You can keep going and read about them, but usually those herbs are moistening. But they're also actions. So we might use, so Taylor, if you're talking about cholerics and melancholics, people who tend to be a little drier for whatever reason, you know, you might have dry digestion. So you might tend towards constipation, and those demulcent herbs are going to be perfect for that. Or if you have dry skin, right, then that's a demulcent herb is something you would want in your life, and just to really think about drinking a lot of that daily. And it doesn't have to, the reason we talk about herbal actions is because it applies to so many different herbs, and no matter where you are. So Taylor, you're going to New Orleans, maybe you'll have different demulcent herbs there. You'll have different herbs that are moistening that you could drink internally to moisten yourself. So anyway, that's kind of where the relevance of herbal actions come in, is we have a general way to describe how herbs will act inside of the body for most people. And there's also another tiny human guest in the form of Julia Pearl. You can hear her in the background. Does that make sense though, folks, as far as actions? Like why we might want to learn herbs, the actions of herbs? Yeah. And then that you might also learn the actions of herbs, because you might want to avoid certain types of herbs, like menagogues. Like for me right now, I'm mooning, and you know, I wanted to take a lot of menagogues right before I started my period, but then stop as soon as I started to bleed, so that I wouldn't bleed more profusely than I already do. But menagogues might be one of those things where you might say like, oh, okay, like, you know, herbs have lots of different actions. So you might have a digestive herb, a lovely warming digestive herb like ginger, but you have somebody in your life who's, you know, really bleeds heavily during their menses. And you might be like, okay, I want a digestive herb that's really nice and warm and lovely like ginger, but I don't want anything that's like a real strong menagogue. Maybe I'll go for mint instead to really help settle my friend's stomach who bleeds really heavily. So there's all these intricacies for learning about herbal actions, or intricacies. It's not even that intricate. It's more just like it's useful patterns to recognize. Just like when you're identifying a plant in the wild, it's useful to recognize like, oh, okay, this plant is good for my belly. It's good for my uterus in this particular way, or maybe it's something that I might want to avoid. But that's always the useful bit about recognizing the clinical action or the herbal action patterns. Any questions about that? Thoughts about that?
I'm curious, what would you say for, like, let's say, I think I'm usually everything also dry. I'm there with you, Taylor, but at the same time, it's like a lot of stuffiness. So there's like this damp sinus stuff happening right now. So I guess those two are kind of like against each other. So what would you recommend for that?
Well, yeah, let's just jump into constitution. So right, that's probably one of the harder pieces to understand in your body is herbal energetics. So whether an herb is more moist or dry, or constitution, so whether a person is more moist or dry, or cold, warm, cold, moist, dry. And as far as specifically your question, I guess the first piece I think of is you're not one, nobody is really one thing usually. So no one's just dry or just cold. And when we get sick, that like you can have different types of energetics inside of your body. So if you've got a lot of mucus and a lot of stuckness, that means like, oh, you probably have a fairly damp condition inside of your sinuses. And there could be a lot of different reasons for that. You could try immediately just to get symptomatic relief, take something dry. Sarah was actually mentioning rose and talking about the nerving component, but rose is also really quite drying. So is nettle. So is yarrow. I think those are nettle and yarrow are the ones that we have in the first week. But then you can also think about, you also got to think about root cause. You can't just think from an energetic standpoint. You'd be like, well, is there a sinus infection? Maybe do I need antibacterial or antifungal herbs? Those are two of the ways I go to it.
And sometimes if you're a someone who's like chronically over dry, the body wants to produce mucus to help combat that dryness. So sometimes if it's like that stuck kind of mucus feeling, that's almost dry mucus, like a dry kind of sense. So marshmallow again can be good for that, where it helps to thin that mucus out. So it's like, you almost like want the mucus for the mucus. And in that way, it's like, if you're someone who underlies with those drying conditions, sometimes it can be nice to, even though you feel stuffy, it might be that stuffiness that doesn't move a lot, or it just feels like there's like that tensionness and it's like sticky mucus. That would be something that is a dry symptom. And I would be adding more demulcents in instead of adding more dryness into that to try to deal with it.
So it's one of the comforting pieces, I think, when you're getting to know energetics, like, is this herb going to work for this? Herbs are relatively gentle. All the herbs that we've included in this course are quite gentle. So you can just try some. And if it makes, so for Carolina, in your case, if you try a lot of something really gooey and moistening, and you're like, oh, this is making me more stuffy and more boggy. You could go a few different ways with that. You could add in something that's warming and moving, kind of to what Brianna is talking about, as far as like, oh, is the mucus like, is it stuck and it needs to flow? Or you could be like, all right, it's not the moistening herbs. Maybe that's not the thing. Maybe more of what I need to do is just move it out of my body, right? So that might be things that are a little more warm and moving. If you all read the energetics section, like things that are moistening can move things out by helping them flow, but it's really helpful if you can have something that's kind of pushing them along a little bit, kind of in the same way that like when you get into a hot shower, it's like warm and moist, and that's usually pretty moving for things like phlegm. But you can kind of just give it a go. You can kind of just try it and see. And if it worsens your symptoms, then either try something in the other direction or try something, kind of just 90 degrees off of that. You're like, oh, okay, well, moistening isn't all that I need. Maybe I need some warmth too.
Yeah, so that's like kind of what was said in the chat too from Sarah, having that over dryness almost makes dry matters worse.
Yeah. Anybody else? Questions is a great start of questionings along like how to work. That's a classic example, like a really good example for how to work with energetics of herbs with somebody's constitution. Mucus is a really nice, easy way to see that, right? Respiratory stuff in general, because it's you can cough it out or not. Anybody else questions about plant energetics? So hot, moist, cold, and dry, or the constitution piece that's in that first week. I can hear chewy. So chewy. If there's no questions, I'm just curious if everybody feels like they've got a show of hands. I know Taylor, you already said you felt like you were pretty dry, and Carolina, you said you were a little dry, but anybody, show of hands or in the chat, a feeling on what constitution you are based on that little quiz that we had in the first week. Dry and cold, says Sarah. Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Or anybody who's like, I don't know. It says I'm everything. After you've taken that quiz.
I think hot. But
Yeah.
again, I live in Tennessee. When I come to Colorado, I actually like it when it's cold outside. I think it feels great. So I would say I do have like an internal fire for sure. And I look at that. Yes, I put chia in my smoothies. Absolutely. Rose, I want to get to know a little bit better. Cucumber water all day long in the summer, lemon water. But then again, you go to a movie theater and you freeze. So I don't know. It's like so cold with the air conditioning.
They put it to like 60 degrees.
Yeah. To keep you paying
So
attention.
Just keep you awake. Dry and cold. So if you know,
I'm dry and cold too.
Dry and cold. Oh, a bunch of dry and cold ladies. Paula?
But I like the cold. Like hot weather just riles me up, like pisses me off. So I think cold is where I like to lean.
So you like the cold. If you're like, if you are, because I'm the same, Taylor, I can't handle it when it gets too hot. And I'm a little more warm in my constitution. So I'm already warm. So I warm myself up more. And I'm
Okay.
oh no, you're talking about like, that's your medicinal, that's your medicine that you want probably is things that are activities or herbs that tend to have a little more of a, oh, like a cooling nature to them. But
Okay.
I think the important piece is like you're not any even just any two things. You usually have like two major things that you'll tend to show up as far as your energetics. You're like, all right, I'm definitely dry. I mean, everybody in Colorado is dry. Like it's really hard in Colorado.
Easy,
You're just
yeah.
like, I'm just so dry, my skin, everything. But then you meet somebody who's really dry and it's like, oh no, you're dry. I'm actually relatively moist. Or you go to a moist climate and it's like, oh no, you're really quite like you are thirsty all the time. And it's not a thyroid thing, right? People are non-pathologically have these tendencies to be dry or to be moist or whatever. But then we talked about before, like you can have disease states that make you something else. Like you can be very cold and dry. And a fever, that's like the classic hot condition, it makes you very warm. So it can take a little time to get to know your constitution too, and get to know kind of the ways that when you tend to get sick, how that tends to show up as far as hot, moist, cold, and dry. Anybody still kind of like, I'm not totally sure what I am? Yeah. Do you want to talk about that as far as working with herbs and kind of ways you think about getting to know your energetics?
I mean, it's kind of like a trial and error. It's kind of like you kind of trial and error it. Whereas like you can feel like certain herbs, they aggravate you in certain ways. So sometimes if it's too dry and you're not sure if you're someone who runs too dry or too damp and you go and drink something super drying, and you get like a tension headache, sometimes can be like a first sign of something that's overly drying for your constitution. Like something like nettle, and you're someone who's already kind of runs on the dry side and you're drinking daily infusions of nettle because it's so superfood densely nutritional for you, which is great. But by day 3, you start getting like this weird headache thing, and you're not normally someone who gets a headache kind of feeling. And so that could be like a sign like, oh, that like overdried me out. And maybe I'm not as dry as I think or not as like damp, hardy as I think I am. So those could be signs like that. An over dampness sign is hard for me to think of. Like that could be something like like a boggy, bloated kind of thing where maybe there's like swelling going on, or even the stomach's feeling like sludgy, like it's just off, like thick kind of feeling. Like that could be that you might have, you hold damp constitutions, and like having herbs that are too slippery, like too much slippery elm could make you almost feel bloated and like you're kind of holding on to too much in your stomach. So there's like a balance of herbs for constitutions, but then there's also, those could be indicators if you're like, I don't know what I am, you could start feeling those indicators based on like, well, spicy food actually makes me like angry. And then it's like, well, then you might actually be like already really hot, and you might not like having more hot things might actually not be the greatest thing for you. It might be good to have some cucumber water. Right. And like, so sometimes you can see from those balances of like how your body reacts to something like spice, or how it reacts to something super cold, where it's like, oh, anytime I as someone who's a cold running tendency person, like there's certain times of the month that I do not want to be around anything cold. And that's usually right before my period, where it just like spikes up my coldness more. And like, it's really aggravating for me and like shuts me down. So that would be a time that I'd be incorporating more warm herbs. But it's like, you kind of figure it out. Like, you're like, oh yeah, no, I definitely run with a chill and have to have socks on and a scarf just to exist in my house or something, like there's different things I feel like that you can clue into.
For the temperaments, would you, or constitution, would you also say like hot people have a tendency to be able to sweat? You know, you hear people that say, oh, when I work out, I really don't sweat. Are they more cold and damp because they're holding?
It could be a stagnancy
Yeah.
thing too. More like a damp, cold stagnancy problem if they're not sweating is how I would see that.
Yeah, and not to make this too much more complicated, but and just know for now that it does, there are more layers than just, your physical hot, cold, moist, and dry. Because there's like, do you have a picture of stagnancy where like things are sluggish because maybe, maybe you haven't been moving your body the whole time? Or maybe, like with menses or something, like people having like bloating and stagnancy and PMS conditions, like, oh, well, maybe you have like an organic reason, like your uterus is tipped one way or the other, so blood flow can't get in. Like there's so much complexity around it. But just as a start, you can really think like just your environment and the things you put inside your body are major indicators. And you can kind of look around to everybody else, like what Brianna was talking about, as far as, certain foods or certain herbs making you feel differently. Making just noticing that, I think, is probably the most important thing, and then pay attention for a couple of years and then see where you're at. Botanical Lisa, 2, 2, 3. Well, let's see. We were gonna try to finish up in about 5-10 minutes here or so, and I want to just make sure that we had a little bit of time to go through and talking about extraction, so that you can, speaking of getting to know your herbs and like doing an herb a week, you know how to make a really good strong extraction. It's Carolina, you said you'd already been working with herbs. Has everybody gotten to, if you haven't gotten to week 4, so I'm just going to prep this so that it's be nice and fast. If you all have questions, you can ask. We talked to you about how to make, quick and dirty, simple, easy instructions for how to make a medicinal dose of tea, as opposed to like, like celestial seasonings, Bengal spice, sort of nice, but not sort of terribly strong kind of tea. If you want to skip ahead to week 4, we talk about herbal extractions with waters. So we talk about infusions and decoctions, especially since this time of year, there's not as much to look at botanically outside. But just really quickly, I wanted to go over something that people often can get confused about, which is ratios, and like how much herb to how much water to use to make something that's really strongly medicinal versus more like a beverage type tea. So this, I wanted to show this up here, and I've drunk some of this, unfortunately, but this is marshmallow. And this is actually a cold infusion, which is, you'll read about marshmallow when you get there. It's better to extract mucilaginous, like gooey, demulsive things in cold water. But you can kind of see there's a good bit of herb on the bottom of this jar. And this is a quart-sized jar, and it was full up to here. I've been drinking it throughout the day or throughout the evening here. But that's a lot of herb. This is probably about an ounce of herb, which is about what you want. You want like an ounce to a quart. Brie, with a lot of her recipes, she works a lot more with volume to volume, for like making oils and that sort of thing. And that's really useful. And a good way without having to have a scale to be able to just make your tea. So we'll show you how to do that in the tea section as well. But just to let you know, like the difference between different volumes of herbs is really important. One of the reasons why we talk about making an ounce of herb by weight into, a quart of water by volume is because an ounce of herb by weight can just vary so hugely depending on what plant part you're talking about, and just from plant to plant. So I just wanted to show this really quick. Can you hold this up? Yes. Okay, so this is, we're going to try to hold this up. So this is from, actually, let's see. I'm curious if you hold that up against all these ones. Great. Okay. So yeah, it is. Yeah, good idea. Okay, so which one do you think is an ounce? The middle one, the end one, one of the, like this one, an ounce?
On the left, yes.
This one? Yeah, that's an ounce. These are all also an ounce. So this is all ounce. This is ginger, the root of ginger. This is the root. It's like some sort of strange game show we're playing. This is the root of marshmallow. And then Bree's one that she has in her hand, that skullcap, that's also an ounce. And the difference is this is a really bulky, heavy root. This is a fluffier root, this marshmallow. And that skullcap, you can see it's all the leaves and flowers. So it's super bulky. So the bulkier your herb is, fluffier. The fluffier your herb is, so your flowers and your leaves, they tend to be higher in volume. And then your roots and your seeds tend to be lower in volume. We put a chart, Carolina, actually, to your point, is this like about 3 tablespoons? There's a chart in week 4 where we talk about rough calculations for like, if you have this much volume of leaf, it probably equals to, this much by weight. Usually about, this is a little over a cup. You can see the skull cap. So about a cup of floofy herb, that's usually about an ounce. And then like a 1/4 cup of dense roots is about an ounce. So you can kind of just go by there if you don't have, because most people don't have a scale at home. But that'll give you an idea kind of what we're talking about when we talk about using, an ounce to a quart. It's a lot of herb and it's a strong preparation. And that's usually also, Carolina, if that we're talking about like, how do you really get to feel the herb in your body? This is a lot of herb for one day, like a whole ounce of herb. This is what I'll get people to take in my practice if they've got some sort of, digestive disease process thing going on. But it'll also, you could just take that one day, use an ounce for a really strong preparation one day, drink it all, and then you can really feel into your body what the herb does. When you take it at a really strong dose, it's another way to kind of get into really feeling into the herbs. And then if you've all been making, does that make sense to everybody? Everybody got questions about that?
I have a question. So that 1 ounce, can you reuse it over and over? Keep adding water to it, cold infusion. It's not going to be as strong, but how long?
2 to 3 steeps is like 3 steeps is usually about your max, but definitely steep it again. Cause like what I notice happens is when you do that first steep, you're like jostling everything up, right? And so everything like loosened up. And then you can drink that after your steep, but there's so much that didn't get pressed out. So that second pour of hot water really helps to pull out kind of the rest of everything. Because there's a lot of medicine left. And then by that third pour, you're kind of like, yeah, that's just kind of like essence water. Like you might have drained it all and you might not taste much of it. But with mucilaginous herbs, you can re-steep roots and barks that are mucilaginous, like marshmallow root or slippery or Siberian elm bark. 5
So
times,
many
10
times.
times, depending, and so
Yeah.
if they still keep getting goopy with every steep, then you still have medicine coming out. Aromatic herbs sometimes can be steeped maybe more than 3 times, like chives, like even on our chai
Gingers.
labels, ginger,
Yeah.
we put on there, make sure you steep 3 times or else you're really wasting what you paid for. In my opinion.
And
You
you can taste it usually. You can be like, is there anything left in this herb? I mean, some things like, like nettle, you might not be able to like taste, or something that's gooey, you'll feel it on your tongue. You'll be like, oh yeah, this is still giving me lots of, mucilage is what we call the substance that comes out of our moistening herbs. That makes it all gooey and like an aloe leaf or something like that. That's all mucilage.
Yeah.
And that comes out and comes out and comes out, and you can see it and feel it in your extraction. Welcome.
Someone else asked earlier in the chat, like how long that infusion would be good for.
If you keep it in the fridge, 2, maybe 3 days. That's another like smell it, and if it smells weird, don't. Smell it the first day, because herbs, sometimes they just smell weird, or they smell. You're like, I don't know, this is an attractive smell.
But it's nice to do, like you could do
Yeah.
that overnight steep where it doesn't need
Yeah.
to be in the fridge, and it could be on your counter by like pouring hot water over your herbs and letting them steep for that 12-hour period and then consuming that in the morning. And so that liquid in the morning, you could either choose to put it in the fridge or just take it with you to drink it for the day. But that liquid that you strain that you have sitting there, usually try to get it consumed by the second day.
Yeah.
Is best.
Think of it like soup, right? You either have to keep cooking it or you have to put it in your fridge, you know, and even in the fridge, it's not going to last for a huge amount of time. Right? You wouldn't expect, like, I don't know, carrot soup or something like that to last for more than a couple of days. So that's it. I mean, usually between 1 and 3 days is about what we'll say. So you could make a big batch of tea and drink it for a couple of days and that'll be fine. I definitely, oh, Pearl, look, you're beautiful. You want to see? Do you want to show everybody? Yeah, okay, here. Yeah, I'll help you over the basket. So a couple of days, this Brianna made this as well. She makes all sorts of great things. Oh, you get down? Okay. That's a great question. Same thing with decoctions. So any kind of water extraction. Yeah, I think soup. I'm going to stand by my example of soup. That sticks with it. As far as how long it'll last.
Can you make a cold infusion with any herb or?
You could. I think the main thing is whether or not it's going to pull anything out of it. You know, we usually say cold, and usually when we say cold, we don't mean like cold, like ice cold water. We mean more room temperature. You know, cold compared to a boiling water extraction. So you can do overnight infusions. So if you wanted to say make something that, I recommend that to my clients all the time who are making digestive teas that have gooey stuff in them, because the goo is really nice and soothing for the gut, and have them actually make an overnight infusion with the marshmallow root or whatever, as well as things like, you know, the mints and sometimes nervines. And as long as it has 8 hours to extract, that's usually plenty of time. And the tea will be dark and it'll be, you know, changed color and flavor and smell. Some things, though, don't really extract super well in the cold, even overnight. So like hawthorn berries is one that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. And you can kind of just experiment and try little bits, you know, extract a cup. That's usually fine of herb. And you'll be like, oh yeah, it doesn't really taste like very much. Yeah, hopefully it's to answer your question. And Paula, you had a hand up. Yeah, go for it.
So if I'm mixing like nettles with marshmallow, because I need the nettles for anti-inflammatory, but I'm a dry person and I get hot. So you're saying marshmallow better with a cooler temperature, but nettles really need the hotter. So what do you do with that? You're mixing. Or don't
if you're mixing, you could totally, nettle is something if you want for the nutritive aspect of things. I love an overnight infusion. Like you make it dark, like you can't even see through it, kind of dark. But you can just do, that's where you could, exactly what Carolina is talking about. It's like, can you do an overnight infusion with some of these kinds of herbs? If they're light and fluffy and leafy, usually an overnight infusion is going to pull them out just fine. Or if they're really aromatic and kind of soft, like ginger. That's a classic root that I'll do as an overnight infusion, and it'll come out, and you'll know that it's worked because you'll smell it and be like, oh yeah, I smell ginger. So you could do that, or Paula, if you wanted, you could. It's winter where you are.
It's
where
Wisconsin winter.
It's Wisconsin winter. So you could just do a longer hot extraction. So you could just pour your tea, infuse it for an hour, and then just drink it. You'll still get some of the moistening, maybe not as much as if you had done an overnight infusion with cooler water, but you'll still get a good bit.
See, I can't drink any hot fluids because I just start to sweat and feel sick. So everything I drink is cold.
Well, and you can just do it so that you have a hot extraction that then gets cooled to room temperature. And then you just drink it cool, and that's fine. But the heat helps with breaking everything down. And especially if you've got something like a moistening herb that you want to extract a little faster, sometimes it helps to break it up a little bit with that heat. Yeah. So if you're going to extract just for an hour, it can be ideal actually to get it out from a hot infusion.
Okay.
So should all overnight extractions be cooled?
No.
Or can they be hot extractions?
No, they can be hot extractions. And then you just let them cool. Yeah. Especially if you're trying to get aromatics out of it. The important thing, of course, for everybody is you gotta Make sure if you've got aromatics, just make sure you put a lid on your jar or your vessel, because otherwise your house will smell lovely and like mint and aromatic things, but then all your aromatics disappear out of your tea, and you want them in your body. I mean, you could also just hover over your cup and just breathe them in, but ideally, like if you want the medicinal effect of mint for the digestive tract, you want them to go into the digestive tract as opposed to in your lungs. So that's why we talk about covering your herbs as an important piece if you're going to make hot extractions of any kind. It's almost time. Do
Do you guys have any other questions about tea things?
I have a quick question about like garlic and yarrow. I think it's not good for people on thinners, blood thinners. Is it specifically the medicine of blood thinning? I forgot what they're called, but anyway, or is it like, for example, we're eating with my mom this natto is like K2, like fermented soybeans, and they're supposed to also be blood thinning. They are, I can see it, but anyway, so does that also count as interaction? Some kind of interaction with these herbs or not?
Yeah, and I think we have that in the garlic materia medica and the yarrow materia medica, and that's why if you all are going to try it, especially if you're on medications or you have some sort of diagnosed condition, like go to the cautions section first, and read through
the back first. There.
But blood thinners are one of the things that's the hardest to work with as far as herbs, because you can have somebody who's on warfarin, like the classic, least expensive, most common blood thinner that people are going to be on. And because of its nature, you have to be careful about how much kale you eat. Like, you better be real consistent. I had a client whose cardiovascular surgeon was like, "Oh no, don't eat any more vegetables." And I'm like, "What? Why?" And I was so furious at him for a little while. I'm like, "Oh my God, they're trying to give themselves more work. What the hell?" But it wasn't that. It was the blood thinner. They were like, he was being a bit of a lazy MD. Because if you are going to eat more greens or eat more garlic or eat more natto or whatever, you just have to be really consistent about it, because the dose of how your blood thinner works inside the body will change. So that's usually the interaction with herbs too. It's not like they're super blood thinning in a way that's really dangerous for most people at all. It's more just like theoretically, because it has this nature to it. You got to be a little careful with people on blood thinners.
So you're saying that garlic and yarrow are also blood thinners, and that's why it's like they're too much?
They're not really blood thinners, but they could interact with blood thinners. You put it that way. That's the short version.
Mm-hmm.
But so can a lot of herbs. I mean, so can a lot of things in general.
What do? You just say, just try a little bit, or what do you do with that?
Little bits. I mean, usually they'll give you guidelines if you're on a blood thinner. Be like, depending on the blood thinner she's on, because it's not every blood thinner. That's the other thing too. Some blood thinners, it doesn't matter how much greens you eat.
Yeah, and so that's where that whole food ratio kind of flies out the window. Is like where you can be like, oh, well, they're fine on food ratios, and sometimes for certain people, food ratios can be too much.
So like a food amount of garlic, for instance, as opposed to like taking a quart of garlic
or like a garlic
tea,
supplement or something. It'd be like food size portions are usually the safest, unless you're being extreme and like juicing kale and juicing garlic. Then you're kind of bumping it up into more like medicinal portions, I guess is how you can think of it. But then again, it depends per person and what their blood work's showing. Like somebody could eat a lot of kale and it might not show in their blood work as versus someone else too. So
yeah, so I'm sorry we can't answer that. It depends very truly on what blood thinner she's on.
Yeah.
She's not on any blood thinner. We're just eating the natto, and it's supposed to be blood thinning too, which I think it is. But it's not an actual medicine.
Oh God, no. Okay, no, you're fine. If she's not on a blood thinner, I thought we were having a totally different.
Oh, sorry, no.
Sorry about that. No, you're fine. Yeah. No, it's not like it's going to double. It does not have the same effect as the pharmaceutical blood thinner. Totally other thing. I know that there's a lot of like garlic for thinning the blood, and it's like no, it's a totally different mechanism to what
Okay.
a warfarin or a common point in your story. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Can I ask 2 quick questions? Very quick.
Okay.
In your Brainiac Brew tea, it mentions an ancient forest tea as
Yeah.
one of the ingredients. I ordered that. I'm just curious, what is the ancient forest tea?
The ancient forest is a forest in China, and it's just an old growth forest that they go and they'll harvest the leaves from usually in the springtime. So it's a black tea. It's kind of like an in-between black green tea, kind of like caffeine wise. And so we get it from Mountain Rose Herbs. Like if you looked up their ancient forest tea at Mountain Rose Herbs, we use that
Okay.
tea, and it's a really nice tea that's got like a light caffeine and not too strong of the black tea tannins with it.
That sounds good. Sounds like an oolong. Sounds like an oolong,
Yeah,
you know, a little lighter. in
it's young.
caffeine.
Gushu. They're old. Is it old trees, like 300-year-old trees?
Yeah.
They
Okay.
express caffeine a little differently.
Oh, good. Thank you. And then my other question is just reading about Milky Oats. I've never come in contact with Milky Oats, and that's one of the ones I think I ordered from y'all.
Yep.
Would that be something that's good for an herbal bath? That just makes me feel like that would be very soothing and
I
calming
thought
for
about
the
it yesterday
bath.
when we were whipping up we whipped up an herbal bath to give in all our orders during the sale that we're doing right now. And it crossed my mind to put Milky Oats in that bath. It wasn't what I wanted for that moment, but I think it would be nice. I think though you could make a nice strong infusion of it, and I think it'd be good. I mean, it's really restoring to the nervous system. It would be nice fresh, like a fresh Milky Oats bath would be like almost like actually kind of milky. If you got it fresh during the summertime, but you could do dry herb like that and do a soak.
I think I really just like oats.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the old man in the gray hat, like actual
Yes.
oats. You put it in a little sack so it doesn't like totally clog up your plumbing. But yeah, you could like drink some Milky Oat tea while you've got an oat soak bath. Oh, it sounds amazing. It sounds very moistening and relaxing.
Sounds hydrating. Yes, and moisturizing. Thank you.
Welcome. In timeout.
He's in timeout. He's just a biter. Okay, folks. Well, so if any of you have more questions, we're just about over our time here, but please use the comment section. We usually takes us like 24 to 48 hours, you know, business hours to get back to you. But if you have questions like exactly what you were asking about, Sarah, or Carolina, what you were asking about with extraction, please feel free to ask, because then the more people that ask questions in there, the more everybody can see it, because you can always go to the bottom and just see kind of like what people have asked from previous plant camps as well. So on any of the weeks, just please feel free to be like, well, what does this mean? Or I'm really curious about this. Where can I find it? You know, I'm looking for, you know, different herbs to work with for tea or for, you know, relaxing or sleep or whatever. And we'll help point you in the right direction, because you've got access to all the weeks at once. So you can kind of just jump around to the pieces you're interested in now that we're out of the first week and change. Oh, another friend over here. Come here. Come here. Come here, little pupper dogger. He's got like that mad naughty look in his eyes. All right, folks.
He wants to laugh.
I think that's it for tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in another month, and hopefully we'll see you in comments threads. And if you're not in the Facebook group, check that out too. We post stuff up there occasionally, especially now that we've started all of our lives and everything. And yeah, have a great night, everybody.
Thanks so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone.
All right, I'm gonna stop these recordings. Stop.